Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first workshop of a three-part series on reading readiness that we are calling the Roadmap to Reading. I want you to leave here today with a lot of ideas and takeaways. So whether you're here because you are just starting this literacy journey with a kiddo or because your student is having trouble with reading skills, the things we're going to talk about will work for you. We are focusing on fundamental skills that students ideally should have before they begin reading instruction. Each of these skills is vital, and students who tend to struggle with reading often have gaps in these areas, but it is never too late to bridge those gaps. My name is Janelle Martinez, and I am the Early Literacy Coordinator for Sequoia Grove Charter Alliance. I have been a teacher for an excessively long time, since 1986. My first teaching job was a second grade classroom. Since then, I've taught every grade, from pre K through high school. I have worked in traditional brick and mortar schools, both private and public. And for the past 19 years, I have been working with homeschooling families through independent study charters. I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren. And an interesting thing about my family is dyslexia runs through my side of the family. My journey in literacy began when I was trying to find answers for a struggling student and went to a workshop on dyslexia. As I was sitting there in that workshop, I realized that everything the speaker was saying described my son as well as my student. My oldest son was struggling a lot with reading, which didn't make sense to me because I did everything right. I read to him. I taught him all about books and print. I was a voracious reader myself. His older sister had picked up on reading fairly easily. It just didn't make sense to me. Well, that workshop was the beginning of a long journey into the study of dyslexia. And I discovered that I am mildly dyslexic, that my dad was dyslexic, and my older son is not the only one of my children who has some symptoms of dyslexia. They all 3 do. Then, when my older son got married and had my first grandson, his wife knew that she was dyslexic. So we figured their children were pretty much guaranteed to be dyslexic. And I started tutoring my oldest grandson in TK. He is now 10 and a great reader. When this job of early literacy coordinator opened up, I jumped at the chance to apply because fostering reading is my passion. And now my job is to come alongside learning coaches and parents like yourself and help you help your students as they learn to read, which is the best part of my job. I am also helping to set up and will be monitoring the new reading screener, which is mandated by the state of California for all kindergarten, first, and second graders. And we will talk more about that at the end of the workshop. Words are magic. Let's play with them. Don't you love that? And I do mean it too. Kids learn best through play. The more you can make it fun, the more engaged they will be and the more they will absorb, just like little sponges. So, really quickly, let's look at some of the big fancy words that we're going to dissect today because normal people don't speak education, right? All of these have to do with sound and, in their most basic form, are completely auditory and do not rely on visual cues, such as the ABCs, except for the last one, and we will get to that one. The first phrase is phonological awareness. How many of you have even heard of this term before? Okay, cool. Could you define it to your best friend? Awesome. And the rest of us will all be able to do that after today, right? Phonological awareness is a big fancy term that means you're aware of the distinctions between words and how they form together to make sentences. It also includes being able to hear the smaller chunks in words, syllables. The second term is phonemic awareness. Have you heard this one before? It's noticing the smallest individual sounds in words and that they can be switched around to make new words. Which brings us to phonemes, the fancy word that we use to mean those small units of sounds. And finally, we have phonics. Everyone knows this one, right? It's matching up the sounds with a symbol, the letters of the alphabet, and learning to read and spell with those symbols. Anyone notice a pattern here? Yep, they all begin with phone. That is from the Greek language, and if you're a Greek scholar, you already know that that means sound. So that's just a brief introduction. We're going to look more closely at these as we continue. So, why do you even need to know these fancy education terms? You don't. Just for the quiz at the end of this workshop. No, I'm just kidding. You just need to know the concepts behind these terms. Your kiddos need to know how to hear the different sounds and how they work together in language. Some children pick these up naturally with no instruction whatsoever, so sometimes this is an overlooked part of reading instruction. But some kiddos need to have these concepts pointed out and be given opportunities to practice them and play around with the sounds. If there are gaps in a child's knowledge of these concepts, that can lead to difficulties when they start learning to read. So, phonological awareness is not phonics. These are the concepts that theoretically should be understood before kiddos begin learning their ABCs and how the sounds work with the symbols. Because a child who cannot hear that a sentence like, I see a dog, is four separate words, or who cannot differentiate the sounds k, a, t in the word cat, will be far more likely to struggle when it comes to phonics instruction, where they need to be able to take apart and put sounds together to make words. So, we're going to talk about three aspects of reading readiness today. Two we have already introduced: phonological awareness, which is hearing the separate words or being able to separate syllables; phonemic awareness, which is hearing the individual sounds in the words; and print awareness. So, in its most basic form, phonological awareness is only based on sounds. Therefore, print awareness is technically not phonological awareness because it does use a visual component, seeing print and understanding how print works. But it does get lumped in with phonological awareness because it is very important in reading readiness. Print awareness involves being aware that the words that we speak can be written down and represented by symbols, the ABCs, even before a child understands and recognizes the individual symbols. It really is an underlying skill in reading development, as it is the bridge between the sounds of our language and the symbols that represent those sounds. All three of these reading readiness concepts get lumped together under the umbrella of phonological awareness, or sometimes phonemic awareness, because people use those two terms interchangeably. But we know better, right? Okay, everybody with me? Let's now do a deeper dive into phonological awareness. Not the umbrella catch all phrase, the actual term. This is where we look at the words and word parts, including compound words and syllables, and how they fit together, and how words fit into phrases and sentences. Would it surprise you to know that some children do not hear individual words in a sentence? They hear, I want ice cream, as all one thing. It's not, I want ice cream. So, one of the things that you can do to assess your kiddos' skills in this area, and also to practice distinguishing the words, is count the words in a sentence. Or if your kiddo's not really great with counting yet, you get 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, that kind of thing. You can instead have them clap the words or stomp them. I highly recommend that you make this fun. Turn it into a game. You can also do things like building trains with blocks, one car per word, or mixing sentences up and saying, a sleep cat was the. See if they can mentally rearrange the word to become the cat was asleep. This is a little more advanced skill, but they think this is hilarious. Then we have compound words. You can have a lot of fun with compound words, and don't get hung up on whether they come up with a real word or not. Nonsense words are great fun also. Do things like, if I say baseball and take away base, what do I have left? Ball. And if I add back foot, what do I have now? Football. Now add other words to it: knee ball, doorball. Again, they have great fun with this. And then finally, there are syllables. Hearing the different syllables in words. You can always do the classic clapping for syllables: table, refrigerator. But one of the most fun ways that I have had success with in teaching children about syllables is using a robot voice. How many syllables are in robot? Robot. By talking that way, you can clearly hear the distinct syllables: table, refrigerator. But do be careful with this one, because a kiddo who doesn't hear individual words in the sentence will not know the difference between the words and the syllables when you're using the robot voice. So, what do you think would happen if a kiddo is learning to read and they don't have a solid grasp of these concepts? It could cause problems in their reading learning, correct? In the description below, there is a link to a page of phonological awareness activities. Use these with your kiddos to not only check their understanding of phonological awareness, but you can also use them to practice the concepts while you're playing. If you have any suggestions to add to this list, please let me know that. I am always looking for more activities to pass on to parents and HSTs. Plus, I play them with my own grandkids. Next, let's look at phonemic awareness. This is the concept that you may have heard about because it most obviously aligns with matching sounds to symbols to decode words, and some reading programs do address this. As you know, phonemic awareness is being able to hear the individual sounds in words. For example, if I say cup, how many sounds do you hear? K, cup. Yes, 3. Please note that the sounds do not necessarily correlate with the number of letters in a word. For example, how many sounds do you hear in the word shoe? That's right, there's only 2. Sh, oo. But there are 4 letters in the word. Our language has only 26 letters, but 44 distinct sounds, phonemes, and those sounds are represented by combining some of the letters to make a new sound. So, S, S, and H combined together make a new sound, sh. Everybody with me? Phonemic awareness is being able to isolate those sounds in the word. But in addition to identifying the individual sounds, kiddos need to be able to manipulate those sounds. For example, blending the sounds back together to make a word. So if I were to say, go get your hat, could they tell that I am saying to go get their hat? Being able to add sounds to a word to make a new one. For example, if I add s to the word car at the beginning, it makes scar. But if I add it at the end, it makes cars. Being able to delete a sound in a word to create a new one. If I were to say bite, but take away the t, what do I have? Bye. Don't leave. And substituting one sound for another sound to create a new word. Flag becomes flap if I take away the g at the end and I substitute in a p. So, like I said, it's not just being able to identify the sounds, it's manipulating them also. And phonemic awareness also covers things like rhyming: at, cat, hat, mat, and alliteration, which is the same beginning sounds, like my mother made marshmallow munchies, or she sells seashells by the seashore. Funny story about alliteration. I didn't know that there was a word that meant the beginning sounds were all the same until I was several years into teaching. I just called them tongue twisters. There was another teacher at my school who used the word in a conversation, and so I went and looked it up. Whoa, I had no idea. So you see, the fancy words don't matter, the concepts do. Okay, so can you see why being unable to distinguish the individual sounds and manipulate them could lead to issues in reading? Yeah. So, how do you know if your child can do these things and help them if they can't? Again, I highly recommend that you approach all of this as a game. You can call them ear games if you want, or sound games. Ask your kiddos to play with you and break a word down into its sounds and see if they can tell you what it is. For example, in this room, I see a b, a, k. Can they tell you that it's a book you're looking at? Or you could say, I have a hat. Can you find two things that rhyme with hat? And send them off looking for things that rhyme with hat. Or you can use their first name and ask them to make alliterations with you. Logan loves lollipops and lemonade. Miley makes meatloaf with mommy. Try doing it with every person in your family. There is a link in the description for some activities and games that you can play with your kiddos to work on these concepts. Remember, these are also a sneaky way to check for their understanding, too. And if you have an older kiddo who is struggling with this, games are a non threatening way to help them gain skills without making them feel like they're lacking. Okay, the next reading ready concept that we're going to talk about is print awareness. This is an often overlooked step in early literacy, as many children seem to pick this up instinctively. But some children need to be explicitly taught these skills, so we are going to talk about it today. Print awareness means that you understand that sounds are represented by symbols. You recognize that there are words on the signs, even if you can't read them. You recognize when somebody is reading a book to you that they aren't making up the story by the pictures, they're actually reading those symbols on the page. From left to right and from top to bottom, direction is an important part of print awareness. So, how do you foster print awareness in a child? Well, one of the absolute best ways is reading to them. Let them pick the book and say, "Ah, where is the beginning of this book?" And let them show you. Point to the words as you read them. You don't have to do this for every word. That would make me crazy. But I do point out a few words at the beginning of each sentence and kind of skim through with my fingers as I'm reading the rest. It's just enough to get the idea across that I'm reading those symbols. And by the way, I am a huge fan of audiobooks because by the time you have read Green Eggs and Ham for the 4,528th time, you are ready to chuck that book out of the window. Am I right? So, absolutely, use audiobooks in the car, listen to Tonys as they go to sleep, etc. But make time to read real books in person too, several times a week if you can. Encourage your child to write, even if it's just scribbles. Have them make lists with you when you're going to the grocery store or write a card for someone's birthday and then have them read it back to you. It's very cute. My granddaughter actually did this for my birthday this summer. Her mom actually took a video of her writing the card for me, and it was, of course, all just scribbles all over the card. But then when she brought it to me, I asked her to read it to me, and she could tell me exactly what she thought it said. Pretend writing. It's awesome. Point out words in their world. Words on signs, words on billboards. Once they do start learning some of their ABCs, ask them to find a B or an S or an L. When you have a child asking you to read something for them, when they ask you, what does that say? You can be pretty confident that they have some basic print awareness. And the link on this slide to the Finding Words scavenger hunt, which is a really fun thing to play, is also on the print awareness activities page that is linked in the description below. Which leads us directly into writing. What? Why would we even talk about writing when we're discussing early literacy and phonological awareness? Because there is a fundamental connection between reading and writing. It has been proven scientifically with brain images and cognitive tests that writing is essential to reading. So I want to put it on your radar right now. Quick side note, does anybody get a lot of pushback when you ask your kiddos to write? You are not alone. I was in a workshop the other day and it was brought up that writing is the most complained about activity in classrooms, too. Some people have suggested that writing journals, fancy paper, writing on small whiteboards instead of paper with different colored dry erase markers have helped their kiddos. But if you have found an additional brilliant solution to the writing resistance, drop me an email or a text and let me know. So, writing develops cognitive skills. You have to understand something before you can even talk about it, and even more before you can write about it. It develops language skills and lets you play around with word placements and sentences and replacing one word with another that's even better. It develops critical thinking skills. Did I write that in such a way that my reader is going to understand what I meant? And last but not least, it also develops fine motor skills. By the way, if you are concerned with fine motor skills, I have some activities to do to enhance them that is in the description below. There are distinct developmental stages in writing. Children first start out by drawing or scribbling, pretend writing, and then they label a picture, and then they write simple sentences, and then eventually they're composing stories and reports. Just a quick note, invented spelling is completely normal. In fact, I don't recommend that you focus on punctuation, spelling, grammar, etc. in kindergarten and first grade. They're going to be picking those things up and they're going to be adding to their spelling skills as they develop their writing. And when you do teach spelling in second grade and up, teach it by the spelling rules, not spelling lists. We will be talking more about this in the next workshop. Editing is a very excellent and vital skill to teach later on down the road. But if you get completely bogged down in spelling and grammar when they're first starting to write, it derails the process. Another thing to note is that reversals, for example, switching D and B, or even M and W, are completely normal until about second grade. However, if they're continuing past third grade, that could definitely be a sign that there's something else going on with this kiddo's brain and how they process things. And if you want to talk more about that, please email me and I would be happy to chat with you about what that could mean. One of the best ways to incorporate writing that I have seen one of my Sequoia Grove families do is using notebooks that have the top half blank for a picture and the bottom half lined for writing. They first draw or paste a picture that they print from the internet at the top of the page. Or they also have one of those Polaroid cameras for kids that the girls use when they go on nature walks, and they paste those pictures at the top. The kindergartner starts off writing one word to explain the picture and moves up quickly to phrases, then sentences. Of course, mom writes for her at first, then helps her to form the letters, then helps her spell a word, etc. The second grader is writing full paragraphs, and the third grader is writing multiple pages. They do all of their science and social studies in these journals, write about books they are reading or about trips that they want to take or have taken. The girls are doing very well academically, and I really believe that this is one of the reasons. Okay, there are other fun writing activities and games linked in the description as well. So, what do I hope that you will get out of this workshop? If you walk away with nothing else, I hope that you continue to read aloud to your children. That is huge in their development. And secondly, I hope you have some good ideas on how to make fundamental skills of literacy fun. Make it fun. We know kids learn through play. And this is just a quick reminder that the Sequoia Scoop that comes out every week on Tuesdays has an early literacy section in it every 2 or 3 weeks. I'm putting ideas for various activities about reading, writing, etc. in there, and you can find previous issues of the Scoop on the Sequoia Bridge. 2 weeks ago, I posted about our new reading program, Amira, which is now available. Which brings us to talk about our early literacy assessment, which will be coming up in March. This is something that the state of California is requiring all students to do, kindergarten through second grade. The whole purpose is to provide early interventions for students who show possible symptoms of reading difficulties, including dyslexia. The assessment will take place in March on a program called Amira. It will be less than 30 minutes long and is going to be online at home. You'll be able to complete it much like the STAR test. The Amira Reading Program is what powers the assessment, and we have made the Amira Reading Tutor automatically available to all students in kindergarten through second grade. It is also available to TK students and third and fourth grade students who need some extra help with reading. You can order it in all access. If you have any questions about Amira or the early literacy assessment, please contact me and I will be happy to help. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I hope this has been helpful and that you have some great ideas to work with as you journey along the roadmap to reading. Watch for the second workshop on phonics, decoding, and spelling, and the third workshop on vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency. Coming soon!